You're a taxpayer and you pay the normal tax rate on your property taxes, but there's one guy in the neighborhood that doesn't. Hi, I'm Chad Booth. Welcome to the county seat today. That is our topic of discussion. And if you live in rural Utah, this is not a fictitious or hypothetical situation. It's very real. Who is that one property owner that skips out on all the property taxes that the rest of us bear? It's the federal government. Today we're going to talk about payment in lieu of taxes, the way the federal government compensates us for our inability to collect property tax on the land they hold title to. They pay about $1 an acre, which is much less than the rest of it, yet they still use the services of the county. How does that work? Well, we'll discuss that during the show. We'll look at the pros, the cons, and the problems. But first, let's get a little bit of background on PILT. Here with that story is Derek Dowsett.
Nationwide, the federal government controls approximately 1/3 of the land in the United States. In the case of Utah, that number jumps to 63%. When Utah entered the Union, Congress agreed that public lands would be held by the United States until they were disposed of, and that those lands would remain exempt from taxation. Between that time and 1976, when the Federal Lands Policy Management Act was passed, policy on those lands shifted from the sale into private ownership to retention and preservation.
And part of that FLPMA Act, they said, well, if we're going to retain the land, and the states, when they ceded the land to them, guaranteed that they wouldn't tax the lands, they said, we do owe you a little bit.
And Congress felt obliged to basically pay counties for county services because counties cannot tax federal land in most states.
Payment in lieu of taxes, better known as PILT, helps fill in those holes in county budgets. So what does that mean for you? Well, it depends on where in the state you live. If you call Salt Lake, Davis, or Weber counties home, the impact is far less because there is far less federal land in those areas. However, in the more rural parts of the state, it becomes a fairly significant part of the county budget.
Your smaller counties with huge amounts of public lands, your counties like Garfield, Wayne, Paiute. First of all, the amount of taxable lands in those counties are just like on the order of 2, 3, 4% of the total land mass. And there isn't a whole lot of commercial valuation there to tax. So those kind of counties really take it really hard.
This year, Utah received just over $35 million for approximately 32 million acres of land, which isn't bad as long as the counties continue receiving that amount. But PILT is subject to appropriations, meaning each year Congress decides how much they will dedicate to the fund. In a sense, the federal government is in a position to dictate how much it will pay the state and counties for their titled lands.
Counties have to set their budgets on an annual calendar year basis. And so here in the fall, they have to start determining what that is. And if Congress hasn't acted yet to fully fund PILT, or to at least keep the levels going the way they have been, it becomes a tricky game for the commissioners, and sometimes they have to stick their necks out and make an assumption. So far, those assumptions have held, but every year it gets dicier and dicier when you talk about the pressures on the federal budget.
The West is different. We have a lot of public lands.
The uncertainty in PILT has left state and local governments wondering if there isn't a better way. One of the questions currently being asked opens up a much bigger and more controversial can of worms. Is there too much federal land ownership in Utah?
That's why a lot of counties in Utah feel like there's a better solution. Either hand the land over to the state of Utah to manage, either by handing title over, or at least let the state do the managing.
I guess if it's a philosophy of who should be managing the land, if the state was managing the land in conjunction with the counties, I think we would see a much higher return on our revenues.
It's part of a bigger problem. The bigger problem being the ability and the willingness of the federal government to manage the lands the way they're supposed to be managed, to compensate local governments for the services they provide on those lands.
For now, counties look to Congress to see whether or not their budgets will be feasible in the coming year. For the county seat, I'm Derek Dowsett.
Derek tells us that the National Association of Counties recently passed a resolution seeking permanent funding for the Payment in Lieu of Tax Fund from the federal government. That'll be part of our discussion when we return with our panel on the county seat. We'll be right back.
What brings you to St. George?
Business meeting.
Staying long?
Just here for the day. Quick in and out. Hey, I just landed. Can we meet in a half an hour?
Not too bad. Why so fast?
Stay any longer? We'll run out of things to do. On second thought. Buddy, something's come up. I'm gonna need another hour. Can we push the meeting till noon? I am definitely gonna need to reschedule. Holy.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy your 45-minute flight to Salt Lake. How'd that meeting go?
I should have booked a weekend.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, SITLA, manages 3.5 million acres of Utah lands with the express purpose of providing financial support to further the education of Utah's students, while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, the School Land Trust Program will distribute nearly $37 million to Utah schools this year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.
Carbon County is typically known for its industry and coal production, but that's not all. Utah's Castle Country has something for everyone. Carbon Country Club Golf Course, with 18 great holes of perfectly manicured fairways and pristine greens, is second to none. And with 4 sets of tees, the whole family can enjoy our golf course. Plus, if you hit it bad enough, you might even find some Indian pictographs hidden in the cliffs above the 18th hole. Visit castlecountry.com for more info.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are here with our panel today for our discussion on the PILT, Payment in Lieu of Taxes. Joining us today is Kent Petros, Commissioner from Duchesne County, Bruce Adams, Commissioner from San Juan County, and Alan Gardner, Commissioner from Washington County. I'd like to start this conversation by talking about the current status of PILT within your counties. There's quite a bit of disparity between all 3 counties.
Well, we've receive about $1.6 million a year into our general fund budget from our PILT off of about 1 million acres of ground, our land, and we provide numerous services in return for that that were required really in the name of health and safety to those visiting as well as our residents.
I don't know if that's really fair for Duchesne County to receive that much money on just 1 million acres. San Juan County has 5 million acres of ground that is under federal control in one way or another, and we receive $1.3 million a year. So, you know, it just leads to the complexity of the formula and has to do with population. It has to do with number of acres, and obviously Kent's got he's got the ear of the Interior Department better than San Juan County does.
I'd like to think so, yes, but that's not true.
Alan, what kind of challenges face Washington County?
Well, Washington County, we receive about 2.7 million, and we've got 1.5 million acres in the county. Roughly about 20% or about 80% of that is federal lands. So I don't know exactly acreage-wise, but it would be a little bit more than Kent and way less than Bruce.
Right.
Population cap has a lot to do with that because of our population is much larger than theirs, so that is really where we make up the difference.
The purpose of PILT is to provide services on those federal properties, and most of us know that those services, the cost of providing those services is certainly not going down, but the constant dollar figure is going down, so it seems a little bit unfair to me that's happening.
If you receive PILT funds and then you receive another source of federal revenue, i.e. like some kind of royalty or something, that they subtract that from the PILT?
That's right. Any kind of payment, grazing would be one in Washington County that we would have deducted. There, you know, if you're a timber county, the payments you received there, oil, gas revenues, things like that, depending on how you had your county set up, whether you had a special service district or not, that would all be could all be deducted from your
Well,
PILT
Kent and I
payments.
sit on the Community Impact Board, and if you receive funds from the Community Impact Board, which is funded by royalty money off of federal property, you can have that deducted from your PILT payment as well.
Well, I think PILT was set up initially to pay the counties because the feds had backed out on giving us the ground, and so I don't know. It's a two-edged sword.
Well, that's a good place to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about that in a little bit more detail and look at some of the solutions for PILT. We'll be right back with the county seat. Stay with us.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Along Interstate 70 and Highway 89 is an area that is rich with high mountain peaks, vast forests, lakes, streams, historical sites, and a climate that is perfect for outdoor adventures, no matter what the season. Join us in Richfield, September 16th through the 20th for the Rocky Mountain ATV Jamboree. Bring the family for guided tours of some of the finest riding in all of the state. In the center of it all, Sevier County.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City, Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit ScenicSouthernUtah.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic Southern Utah.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our conversation today is about payment in lieu of taxes, the way the federal government reimburses counties across the state for not being able to collect property tax on federally held lands. They get a pretty good rate, I guess, compared to normal taxpayers to start with, and then the formula complicates things. This is a problem that isn't just specifically a Utah or Western problem. Apparently, this is a problem that affects, in some way or another, 49 of the 50 states. Is that right?
Yeah, there's every one of the states but one, and I think it's Delaware, I'm not sure just which one, doesn't receive some amounts of PILT. The majority of it definitely comes to the western states.
Is the real problem the fact that they've continually underfunded it?
It's not only underfunded, it shouldn't be there in the first place. We ought to be able to just have our lands and manage them and do what we're supposed to, or be able to do with it. It is underfunded, but you know, having those other states being part of PILT has helped us a lot in lobbying it and getting support from the East. Before, when we were initially at the front end, you know, trying to lobby and say, hey, we got all this land we're trying to take care of, they didn't have much of a feeling for it, but we can get counties back there that have a large amount of public lands, and there seem to be you know, concentrated in the states that are there in various counties. If we can get those counties to come in and lobby their senators and congressional people, why it's been very effective to helping us get PILT raised up to where it was, because so long we didn't have nearly as much as we're getting.
Well, this has been something that NACO has paid attention to most recently. I believe, Bruce, you said there was a resolution?
Absolutely, and PILT has only been funded at 100% for the last 3 or 4 years, and so National Association of Counties, Alan and I sit on the Public Land Steering Committee, and a resolution came through our steering committee, and it would come out of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a fund that's perpetuated by royalties on offshore gas and oil wells. And the purpose of that fund is to acquire land for the federal government. Our contention is that the federal government doesn't manage the land that they have right now, properly. And so we're seeking to help them understand where they can go for permanent full funding of PILT.
If we had this as a permanent source of funding from the LWCF funds, why, that would really make it a lot easier on us. We wouldn't be back there lobbying all the time trying to maintain the PILT funding that we're getting.
Well, it makes it easier for Congress too,
Yeah.
Chad. I mean, Congress doesn't want to have to try and figure out how to fund PILT year after year after year. And so our suggestion is fund it from this fund and put it in place permanently. And then every year, counties don't have to go back to DC and ask for them to find a way to fund PILT.
Wasn't it even becoming more of a problem because of sequestration and the fact that, you know, as of today in the taping of this program, it looks like we're headed for another showdown with sequestration between the administration and Congress. Would this alleviate that problem in the short run?
Absolutely. The sequestration issue, every county received letters early on telling us how we were going to be shorted by, I believe it was 20%. 2%.
No, 5%.
5%, which, you know, of $1 million is a pretty good piece of money. And there's an instability about trying to budget in a county when you never know what that particular revenue source is going to bring into you. So when you start trying to put your budgets together and trying to allow for these services and what you can do on these public lands, it makes it really difficult on the county level.
Well, we're mandated by law to provide the services, Chad, whether we have the money or not. We're just asking for the federal government to participate through PILT to help the counties to provide those services, which are life-saving services out on these public lands in San Juan County. We joke quite often that people from the Wasatch Front like to come to San Juan County to get lost or to get hurt, and then they expect the San Juan County Emergency Services to come and rescue them. There's a cost to that, and so without some assurity from the federal government that we're going to get that PILT money, it makes it hard for us to make our budget.
I appreciate the humor in what you just said, but I know I'm going to get emails about that.
Well, we had one come to Duchesne County and get lost in the wilderness from Australia that cost us $40,000, and unfortunately we never did find him, but he was all by himself, and so that's the kind of stress that it puts.
So Alan, you earlier alluded to the fact that we really should have control of these lands anyway, and I'm sure that makes reference to the Public Transfer Act, Public Lands Transfer Act. Is the PILT part of the reason that bill had progressed forward and is passed in Utah, and I guess is about to pass in several of the other western states?
Well, PILT plays a part of that, and you know, counties are, as we approach that, some of them are nervous, saying, well, what if the state takes over, what happens to my PILT, or what do I, you know, what makes that up? And we feel very strongly that there's enough natural resources in the state that we're more than make up the PILT payment that we're receiving. We're kind of getting a pittance for what we really ought to be getting.
The federal government talks about an $8 or $9 billion loss in managing the public lands, just on BLM lands alone. Do you think you could turn that into a revenue neutral or a positive thing by better management?
Oh, absolutely. It would be definitely a positive thing with just the oil gas that's out in the Uinta Basin. Why, you know, it just, everything else is minuscule compared to that, the potential that's out there, besides the resources in the rest of the state.
The naysayers to that would argue that if you do that, you will use up that resource and you'll be back into a boom and bust type of an economy.
The GAO from the federal government accounting office here last year came out with the analysis that there's more oil, gas in the Utah, Colorado, Wyoming area there than there is in the rest of the world. So, you know, we're not going to run out for a long time.
So it's
we just need to be able, the BLM every year is, or every day is chopping a little bit more off of what they'll let you go in and mine, canceling leases or putting areas in.
That's really had an impact on you with uranium, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, it has. Well, you look at Uinta County, they've contributed to the CIB in the last 5 years $182 million in royalty. That's a quarter of the royalty that comes off those federal lands. So you multiply that out, and that's That's a significant amount of money in one county only, Chad.
Well, we're going to continue this discussion on PILT and look at some of the other options and what counties should be preparing for in case everything goes wrong with the federal government. We'll be right back with more of the County Seat in this discussion in just a minute.
If you haven't been to Starvation in a while, you're in for a great surprise. New campsites, new cabins, and beach improvements await your next visit. Just 2 hours away, but a world away from the Wasatch Front in Duchesne County. Starvation State Park is located 4 miles northwest of Duchesne, just off US Highway 40. Duchesne County. Close enough for business, far enough to get away.
The best part about raising children here in Vernal and the Uinta Basin is just the smaller community that makes you feel like when you go somewhere you know everybody.
It's not too big, it's not too small. We're close to the Wasatch Front if there's anything we need out there.
So we packed up our 3 kids and here we came to Uinta County, and what a great place it was. What a great move.
My job has offered me the ability to college educate all 3 of my children.
My father, he was an engineer for Chevron, retired 39 some odd years. And Jeff, my husband, it's the same way. He's always worked in the oil and gas, always had a job here.
Uinta Basin's been fantastic in supporting what we've tried to do both as a business and also in the development of mountain bike trails and the sport of mountain biking.
It's one of the big reasons why I live where I live is I'm able to run up to a beautiful place like this and spend some good quality time.
There's always plenty to do in Uinta County.
Welcome back to the County Seat. Our conversation today has been about PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, and the federal government's obligation to pay counties for federal land that they're not allowed to tax within their counties for property tax. Should counties really be relying on the federal government for so much of their budget? I mean, are we setting ourselves up because everybody, well, it depends upon which radio station you're listening to, but if you listen to some of the radio stations, you've got pundits on there every day that's saying we are not that far away from a government collapse and that PILT may go away completely. What kind of impact would that have on your counties?
That would be significant on us to lose PILT. You know what, as I've said earlier, the best solution to me is to turn it over and let the states manage. But if we lost PILT, it would be a significant cut. We'd have some major layoffs or cutbacks. We'd have to, or tax raises. You'd have to do something to make up part of the revenue. Or
in San Juan County, Alan, it would cost jobs. We would have to lay off people. We would have to significantly reduce services. You know, we only have about 440,000 acres of private property that we try to collect taxes on to provide services to 5.5 million acres of property. So without that PILT money, we would have to lay people off and we would have to reduce services, and you know, it would be a big hit to San Juan County as well.
Would you have a problem?
I don't think it's absolutely unhealthy for a county to have to rely on it, but the reality is that we do, because of what's been mentioned in needing to provide these services, the access to public lands, you know, just the transportation corridors and the roads are huge, and there's something that the public is demanding, and it isn't just our county populations, it's all those individuals that come to visit us.
Would this be so devastating to a point that it would actually threaten the public health and safety, which is one of your major charges?
Well, from the standpoint of PILT, PILT is set up to and mandated that we have to provide first responders, we have to provide law enforcement, we have to provide roads, we have to provide a number of things, and we have to do that by law. So without funding that, I just don't see how we could continue to do that. I think it would be a big hit on public safety.
It couldn't help but be an impact on.
In the many conversations I've had since we first addressed the Public Lands Transfer Act and this movement, which is Western in nature now and expanding, it continually comes up to the fact that, well, one, the state couldn't manage it, and two, it's an impossible task. Do any of you see a way that this could actually happen because you're laying this out as a potential solution? Is it within the realm of possibility?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you know, I think the state could very well manage it. As you look at comparisons in other states, just in the timber industry, the state forests are outproducing the federal forest hands down. They're managing very well, making revenue. The federal forests are going backwards. That's where we're having our big fires because of mismanagement, because of lawsuits by the environmental community that has caused a lot of that. But something that was really concerning to me back in at our conference in Fort Worth that Bruce referred to, the Forest Service representative that was there indicated, you know, even if we were back had the ability to go back into management and active timber sales, we've lost over 30% of our people that have worked in that area. We probably don't have the ability to even do that.
Well, you look
that's
at
something I hadn't thought about before, but that's a real concern.
You look at your county and my county. What's been your experience dealing with SITLA lands versus dealing with BLM or forest lands? I mean, there's no comparison about the ability to work with those SITLA people compared to the others.
But Bruce, the detractors will tell you that SITLA is a lot more risky to deal with because they don't have all those checks and balances of environmental concern that the federal government has.
Well, one thing I'd want to point out here, that if the state gets the land, it's not going to SITLA. This is going to be a state-managed thing. It's not. SITLA is School Institutional Trust, and that generates money strictly for the schools. If the land transferred back to the states, it would not be managed by SITLA. The envision I have and that the counties have been working on is, you know, we're going to have local county involvement with the state agencies, and they'll be working by our land plans, and we're going to have a lot of input into what's happening locally.
I think the contention is that the counties may not, if they're involved, or the state, may not be as good as stewards of protecting the environment as the federal government.
See, and I can't buy off on that because I know for a fact that we care just as much about it as anyone else out there, and we have learned how to be good stewards in the state and local government, and so I would adamantly disagree with that point.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation on PILT. You can watch it again on our website, and that's where you'll find Facebook, and that's where you make your comments. We'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next week on the County Seat.